The email hit my inbox on my 34th birthday, exactly 4 months to the day after my husband's sudden death. The subject line read, "DocuSign completed." I opened the attached file. There, spanning the bright screen, sat a binding agreement for a luxury wedding venue in Tulum, Mexico. The total cost was $100,000. My younger sister, Brianna, had booked the ultimate destination wedding right on the bottom line. My signature was electronically forged as the primary financial guarantor. She actually expected my dead husband to pay for her party. My chest tightened. I swallowed the sharp lump in my throat and grabbed my phone. I logged straight into my banking portals and locked my Social Security number across all 3 credit bureaus. Then I permanently revoked the emergency credit card she had on file. The financial cutoff was absolute. I am an emergency room charge nurse every single day. I handle code blues, severe trauma arrivals, and hysterical family members screaming in the waiting area. My entire career is built on staying absolutely calm while the world falls apart around me. That intense medical training is the only thing that kept me standing when Trevor collapsed in our kitchen. We had 8 beautiful years together before an aneurysm took him on a random Tuesday morning. My family, however, operates on a very different frequency. While I was picking out a casket with trembling hands, my father, Marcus, and my sister, Brianna, were already calculating the life insurance payout. They viewed my grief as a temporary inconvenience and my newly inherited assets as a family slush fund. They see an independent, grieving child not as a human being in pain, but as an unlocked automated teller machine. Their cruelty is never an accident. It is a deeply ingrained belief that my resources belong to their collective comfort. Brianna cornered me right at the funeral reception, her eyes perfectly dry and her tone dripping with absolute entitlement. She claimed a lavish wedding was the only way to bring joy back to this broken family. She demanded I fund the entire event to honor Trevor's memory. My mother, Catherine, stood right behind her, nodding in agreement. Catherine is driven entirely by country club optics and neighborhood gossip. When I told them absolutely not, Catherine stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. She asked if I knew how it looked if they canceled, reminding me that her friends had already booked their flight. She accused me of trying to humiliate them on purpose. They left the reception early, disgusted that I would not open my checkbook over my husband's grave. They broke my heart that day. Today, I am the one holding the hammer. 2 days after I froze my credit, the real escalation began. I was halfway through a grueling 12-hour night shift at the Charlotte Hospital when the double doors of the triage waiting room slammed open. My father marched inside, his face red, his voice booming over the hum of the cardiac monitors. He had tried to use the emergency credit card to pay the initial catering deposit, only to have it decline in front of a high-end vendor, enraged by the financial block. He decided a public ambush was the best way to force my hand. He pointed a finger at me in front of my staff and 3 waiting patients, loudly accusing me of abandoning my own flesh and blood for a dead man's bank account. He demanded I unlock the card immediately, threatening that the venue deposit was already locked in and I was legally on the hook for the balance. My charge nurse training took over. I maintained absolute clinical eye contact. I signaled the security guards by the entrance. I watched the arrogant anger drain into embarrassment as 2 armed guards escorted my father out into the parking lot. Walking back to my desk, I pulled up the DocuSign email again. The venue manager had attached the verification documents. One glance at the screen confirmed the reality of the situation. Brianna had used a secretly snapped photograph of my driver's license to bypass the venue's security check. She must have taken the photo from my purse while I was sleeping in the days immediately following the funeral. This was no longer just a family annoyance or a sisterly overstep. This was documented. Premeditated felony identity theft. I invited my parents and my sister to the exclusive Charlotte wedding venue under the guise of finalizing the payment. They arrived dressed in designer clothes, looking incredibly smug and triumphant, already discussing linen colors and floral arrangements in the grand lobby. I did not bring a checkbook. Instead, I walked out from the manager's office, flanked by the venue's general manager and a uniformed patrol officer. The color drained from Brianna's face instantly. I slid the fraudulent printout across the marble counter directly to the officer, never breaking eye contact with my father. I officially declared the signature a forgery and voided the contract on the spot. The patrol officer took a formal report, explaining that wire fraud requires a detective's investigation and a grand jury subpoena, meaning no immediate arrest would happen today. The venue manager, however, was furious. He declared the contract void, but stated the $15,000 hold was now forfeit due to the fraudulent booking. He looked directly at my father. Marcus panicked, desperate to avoid a deeper police inquiry and frantic to save his pride in front of the elite manager. My father impulsively threw down his own platinum credit card to cover the penalty. He chose to legally assume the debt to buy his way out of the lobby, storming out the glass doors with my mother and sister trailing behind him in absolute silence. They walked away with a massive bill and a false sense of victory, thinking they had outsmarted the legal system. A few weeks passed. Brianna settled for a scaled-down backyard rehearsal dinner. My father, overconfident because he was not arrested in the lobby, grew desperate to cover his new $15,000 credit card debt. He made a fatal miscalculation. He used an old emergency spare key I had given him years ago to break into my house during my next overnight hospital shift. He rummaged through my private home office, photographing my actual Social Security card and my bank statements, intending to open high-yield personal loans online to cover his tracks. He thought he was just stealing from his daughter. A simple family matter he could later guilt me into dropping. He did not realize my husband Trevor was a very methodical man. Trevor had placed his assets into an irrevocable spendthrift trust managed by a major corporate wealth management bank. When my father attempted to route funds using my stolen identity, he was not stealing from me. He was legally attempting to defraud a multi-billion-dollar federal financial institution. The bank's automated anti-money laundering software flagged the unauthorized routing instantly. The federal authorities do not wait for business hours. The police arrived right in the middle of Brianna's backyard rehearsal dinner. They arrested my father in front of 20 guests for felony burglary and wire fraud. My phone rang 10 minutes later. It was my father, screaming through the receiver for me to drop the charges, begging me to remember that we were family. I listened to his stammering panic. My reply was quiet and absolute. I told him I did not press the charges. I explained the corporate trustee pressed the charges, and a federal bank does not negotiate with family. I hung up the phone. The fallout was absolute. My father is currently facing severe federal and state charges, staring down a reality where his arrogance has finally met an immovable wall. My mother's punishment was poetic and devastating to her core. To cover his massive bail and the mounting legal retainers, she was forced to publicly put a for sale sign on her prized suburban home. Her social reputation, the only thing she ever truly cared about, was utterly destroyed by the neighborhood gossip she spent her life trying to control. Brianna's fiance discovered the criminal behavior and the massive secret debts, packed his bags, and canceled the wedding permanently. As for me, I found complete peace. I took a portion of Trevor's trust and quietly funded a local history scholarship in his name at the university where he used to teach. I made sure his legacy continues to build people up. Completely untouched by the people who tried to tear me down, let us talk about the reality of walking away from the people who raised you. Manipulators rely entirely on your fear of breaking the family. They use the titles of mother and father as a shield to commit acts that, if done by a complete stranger, would result in immediate imprisonment. They count on your silence. They count on your deep sense of shame. The immediate aftermath of this kind of betrayal is a quiet, empty house. The judge ultimately sentenced my father to 4 years in state prison, ordering full restitution for the financial damages he caused to the banking institution. My mother moved into a small, cramped apartment on the exact opposite side of town, completely ostracized by the wealthy country club friends. She sacrificed her own daughter to impress. Months later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. The return address was the state correctional facility. The handwriting was my father's. The words inside were entirely predictable. He claimed he did it for the family, that he was still my father, and that I owed him forgiveness because blood is thicker than water. I read the words. My pulse stayed perfectly steady. I dropped the letter directly into the paper shredder without writing a single word in response. Indifference is the ultimate proof of healing. My life today is built on a foundation of chosen family. I spend my weekends hiking with my fellow emergency room nurses, people who understand the value of showing up for each other without keeping a ledger of favors. I share dinners with friends who celebrate my successes instead of calculating how to extract them for their own gain. The peace in my home is profound. A stark and beautiful contrast to the chaotic, screaming demands of my past. When I look around my living room now, I see the life Trevor and I built, preserved and protected by the boundaries I finally had the courage to enforce. If you are watching this and you are exhausted from carrying the weight of ungrateful people, I need you to understand 3 absolute rules of survival. Rule number 1, boundaries are not punishment. They are the first honest accounting a toxic relationship will ever receive. When you stop financing their dysfunction, you force them to face their own reflection. A toxic family dynamic relies on one person absorbing all the cost. Once you refuse to pay, their entire system collapses. Rule number 2, do not negotiate with emotional terrorists. When family uses your trauma to extract value, silence and legal documentation are your only safe responses. A shared last name is not a license for financial abuse. You do not owe anyone an explanation for protecting your livelihood. Rule number 3, the best revenge is not watching them fall. The best revenge is building a beautiful, peaceful life where their noise can no longer reach you. Blood does not make you family. Loyalty, respect, and fundamental human decency make you family. You are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, even if you have known them your entire life. Trust is earned, not owed. Are you currently funding someone else's comfort at the expense of your own peace? If you have a folder of receipts you have been too afraid to use, take this as your sign. Let me know in the comments what boundary you are drawing today. And subscribe if you are ready to close their account for good. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are probably asking yourself, why did it take a forged signature on a $100,000 contract for her to finally cut them off? Why did she put up with their staggering entitlement for 34 years before finally bringing the hammer down? The answer is something psychologists call the slot machine effect, or intermittent reinforcement. When you are raised in a toxic family dynamic, you are not dealing with a normal relationship, you are dealing with emotional gambling. Growing up, her parents probably did not abuse her every single day. Every now and then, they threw her a crumb of affection, a tiny payout of validation that kept her pulling the lever, hoping that this time she would finally hit the jackpot of unconditional love. She was not stupid for staying. We tolerate the financial drains and the emotional disrespect because we are addicted to the hope that our parents will finally step up and love us the right way. But as we just saw, they do not change. They just escalate. This is exactly why Vanessa's response was an absolute masterclass in financial self-defense. Let us break down the street smart moves that saved her life. First, she used the audit strategy scammers, even the ones who share your last name, hate speed and they hate details. Instead of calling her sister to cry over the betrayal, she instantly locked her social security number across all 3 credit bureaus and pulled the digital metadata. She removed the emotion and treated her sister exactly like a hostile hacker. Second, she focused on building the case. When her father ambushed her at the hospital, she did not defend herself. She let him throw a public tantrum, quietly gathered the receipts, and brought a police officer directly to the venue to document the fraud on the spot. Finally, she executed the ultimate buyout. By leaning on the corporate trustee of her late husband's estate, she removed herself as the target entirely. She let the bank's automated federal fraud algorithms do the dirty work. She invested in her freedom by stepping completely out of the ring and letting federal banking laws body slam her father. 6 months after the sentencing, the house finally stopped feeling like a museum of grief. For a long time, every room carried Trevor's absence. His coffee mug still sat in the back of the cabinet. His reading glasses were still tucked beside the living room lamp. His handwriting still appeared on little sticky notes inside books, on old grocery lists, and on the label of a storage box in the garage. At first, touching any of it felt impossible. Then, slowly, it started to feel less like reopening a wound and more like honoring a life that deserved peace. That was the cruelest part of what my family tried to do. They did not just try to steal money. They tried to invade the sacred space grief had left behind. They saw a widow's shock, a dead husband's trust, and a house full of memories, and somehow decided all of it was available for their convenience. But grief is not an open wallet. Love is not a family fund. And a dead man's final act of protection is not a party budget for people who never respected him when he was alive. The scholarship in Trevor's name became the first thing that made the future feel possible again. The university sent me the first thank you letter from a student who received it. A young history major who wrote that the award meant he could stay enrolled through the semester instead of dropping out to work full time. I read that letter at the kitchen table with my hand pressed over my mouth, crying for the first time in weeks without feeling broken. Those tears were different. They were not the tears I cried when I picked out Trevor's casket. They were not the tears I swallowed when Brianna demanded a wedding over his memory. They were not the tears that burned behind my eyes when my father screamed at me in the hospital waiting room like I was a criminal for protecting myself. These tears felt clean. They reminded me that money can be used to exploit, or it can be used to heal. My family wanted to turn Trevor's legacy into a luxury backdrop for photos. Champagne and applause. Instead, it became tuition. Books, a second chance for someone who would actually carry his memory forward with dignity. That was when I understood something important. Justice does not always arrive as revenge. Sometimes justice is simply redirecting what predators tried to steal into something they could never corrupt. Catherine never adjusted to the downfall. The small apartment across town had thin walls, no manicured lawn, and no neighbors worth impressing. According to the few relatives who still tried to pass along updates, she kept telling people that everything had been exaggerated, that Marcus had made one bad decision under stress, that grief had made me cold and vindictive. She still could not say the truth out loud. Her husband broke into his widowed daughter's home. Her daughter forged a signature on a 6-figure contract. They tried to turn a dead man's estate into a private bank. But people like Catherine do not survive on truth. They survive on presentation. And once the presentation was gone, there was nothing left for her to hide behind. Brianna disappeared even faster. The canceled wedding stripped away the fantasy she had built around herself. The fiancé left. The vendors talked. The social media accounts went silent. For years, she had mistaken attention for love and luxury for worth. When the attention turned against her and the luxury vanished, she had no identity left to stand on. For a while, I thought that would satisfy me. I thought watching them lose everything would fill the empty place they carved out of me. It did not. Consequences were necessary, but they were not healing. Their collapse did not bring Trevor back. It did not erase the voicemail from my father. It did not undo the moment I realized Brianna had stolen my identity while I was sleeping in the days after my husband's funeral. What healed me was quieter. It was changing the locks and sleeping through the night. It was opening my bank account without panic. It was sitting with friends from the emergency room after a brutal shift, eating takeout on the living room floor, and realizing no one there wanted anything from me except my company. It was learning that peace can feel unfamiliar when you have spent your life confusing chaos with responsibility. The hardest habit to break was the instinct to explain. Every time an old family friend hinted that I should be more forgiving, I felt the old version of myself rise up, desperate to present evidence, timelines, documents, police reports, proof. I wanted them to understand. I wanted them to know I had not destroyed my family. I had simply stopped funding its destruction of me. But eventually, I stopped explaining. People who require a full legal brief before they believe your pain are not safe people. Anyone who hears they forged my signature and still asks whether I was too harsh is not asking for context. They are asking me to return to the role that made everyone else comfortable. So I let them think whatever they needed to think. That too became freedom. Because peace is not just removing toxic people from your life. It is also surrendering the fantasy that everyone will understand why you had to do it. The letter from Marcus was the final test. The old me would have kept it in a drawer. The old me would have reread every line, searching for a real apology hidden underneath the manipulation. The old me would have wondered if prison had humbled him, if losing the house had changed Catherine, if Brianna's silence meant regret. But healing teaches you to recognize the shape of a trap before you step into it. He did not write because he was sorry. He wrote because he was uncomfortable. He wanted forgiveness to soften the consequence. He wanted the word father to unlock a door that his actions had permanently sealed. The shredder did not just destroy a letter. It destroyed the last thread of obligation. After that, the house became lighter. I painted the guest room. I boxed up Trevor's clothes slowly, keeping the sweater that still smelled faintly like his cedar soap. I planted rosemary by the back steps because he used to joke that every decent home needed something green and stubborn growing near the door. Some evenings, I still miss him so sharply it steals my breath. But grief is different now. It belongs to love, not betrayal. It is no longer tangled with phone calls, demands, fraud alerts, or family emergencies that somehow always required my money. There is dignity in mourning someone properly. There is dignity in protecting what they left behind. And there is dignity in refusing to let greedy people rewrite loss into opportunity. So if you are listening to this while carrying the weight of people who call themselves family only when they need access, understand this clearly. You are not cruel for closing the account. You are not heartless for protecting the locks. You are not selfish for refusing to turn your grief, your savings, your inheritance, or your future into someone else's rescue plan. A shared last name is not a contract. A parent's title is not immunity. A sibling's tears are not proof of innocence. Real family does not wait until you are shattered and then search your pockets for something useful. Real family does not weaponize your grief. Real family does not ask you to honor the dead by betraying the living person they loved. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is let the legal system speak where your heart is too tired to argue. Sometimes the strongest boundary is not a speak, not a confrontation, not one final emotional message. Sometimes it is a locked credit file, a shredded letter, a silent phone, a life where their emergency no longer becomes your responsibility. The house is quiet tonight. The trust is protected. The scholarship continues. The people who tried to steal from grief are finally trapped inside the consequences of their own choices. And somewhere in that quiet, beneath the ache and the memory and the life slowly rebuilding itself, there is something stronger than revenge. There is peace, not borrowed, not begged for, not purchased with obedience, earned. The hardest truth in this world is that sometimes the people who gave you life are the exact same people trying to drain it from you. You cannot outlove a parasite, and you cannot budget your way out of financial abuse. Your peace of mind has a high price tag. And sometimes you have to be willing to let toxic relatives face their own ruin to protect it. If this breakdown opened your eyes today, hit that subscribe button for more street smart survival strategies. Drop a comment below and let me know if you have ever had to enforce an iron boundary with your own family. Stay safe, stay smart, and protect your peace.